Hi, everyone. Welcome to In Focus. I'm Adam. This week, Joe and I are going to be talking to you about our top architectural photography tips. So let's go ahead and get started. Hey, everyone. I'm Adam, and welcome to In Focus with Adam Goldberg Photography and Joseph Roybal Photography. Joe, how are things going out in Colorado today?
Hey man, good. Adam, how you doing, dude? I am doing well. Um, it's been one of those days, busy. But
Good.
yeah, how are you doing? And I'll get to what I was going to say in a second. But how are you doing out there?
I'm good. I'm good. Busy day as well. Looking forward to getting some more shoots in here over the next couple days, which should be fun. And weather is starting to heat up in Atlanta, so things are starting to get a little bit busier as the grass gets greener, the trees bloom. I feel like architectural photography and real estate photography start to pick up because everyone wants those exteriors to look really good. So hopefully it's
Extra
not
nice.
still snowing in Colorado.
Extra nice. No. We're starting to have the exact same out here, which is what's really fun that we're talking about. And you're alluding a little bit here to the architectural bit
I did.
because I just did an architectural shoot last week, but this is your
Excellent.
wheelhouse. So I'm super excited for this tonight. So, yeah.
Yeah, we are talking about architectural photography. And on this episode, Joe and I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what I would say are our top tips for architectural photography. There's so many different components to it. So we did kind of have to narrow it down and keep things a little bit high level. But I think these are some really good ideas and ways that you can improve your photography by just taking these couple little steps, and hopefully at the end of the day just blow your client away with the end product, because that's the goal with any architectural shoot, is to deliver those images to your client and just have them be like, wow, this
Wow.
person killed it.
Right. Well, and the thing that's cool about this one here, and I think and you and I have talked on the back end, that
Mm-hmm.
what's cool about this one is that, like you said, this is kind of high level. This is one of those, and looking through our notes for tonight, um, these are kind of like the capturing and like how to set it up and do this, where you're going to be giving at a certain point, you're going to be giving a little more of like an
I'm going to go
editing.
more technical. Yeah. At some
Yeah,
point, dive into kind of more the editing workflow and all that,
exactly.
for sure.
So this is like one prong of many.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right.
So are we ready? Should we get going?
Well, I mean, I'm excited because I've been sitting here all day working on this edit, and I've been like, God dang it. No, I was like,
Well,
Adam would be able to
hopefully some of
crush
these
this.
will help you so that way you don't have as many god dang it moments
Adam would crush this out
editing.
in probably like an hour or two, and I've been sitting here for 15. All right, so I think, yeah, let's hop in because I want to hear. I want us to get through these so people can hear what we got, because I'm excited, so I know they're probably excited too.
Awesome. All right. So number one is scouting the space. We talked about scouting actually for an entire episode last week. Scouting is super, super important. And I'm not going to dive into as much detail as obviously we did last week when we talked about scouting. So if you haven't watched episode 3, go back, check that out. However, from an architectural standpoint, anytime that you can go out and scout a space with your client, I do recommend it. Not only does this finalize the expectations around your shot list, which is critical, so that way you go into the shoot knowing exactly what you're doing, but you can see how the light is in the
Mm-hmm.
space, which is so important because you might change your mind about what time you wanted to do the shoot.
Right.
Excuse me. And so you can really just go ahead and have your whole plan of your shots done. And what that's going to do is hopefully speed you up on the day of the shoot. There's nothing worse than showing up for a half day shoot and it takes you significantly longer than that. And because it was something that you didn't scout beforehand, you can't charge the client for when
Yeah.
you had the opportunity to scout it. Also, the other bonus is that if your client has already agreed to the perspective of the shot, they've kind of seen how you're lining everything up, then there's now one less potential hiccup when you send them the deliverables, because they've agreed to this perspective. They know what you're going to shoot. They know how you're going to set it up. This is, again, assuming that they're not there the day of the shoot. But again, that scouting is going to just help pay off for that end result. One less thing that anybody can come back and say, hey, did you happen to take it from over here or something like that? I know it's not wedding photography or something like that where
Well,
you don't get it, but you don't want to have to go back out and reshoot something when you didn't have to, because all you had to do was scout it with the client.
sure. Well, that's a good point that you brought this up with the light, because do you remember I texted or emailed, I probably texted you a week or two ago and asked you about the lighting,
Yeah.
because I knew that this is something that you know so well. So I just was like, hey, when it comes to setting something up, do you consider lighting a lot? And so, and you just already, you just commented on that. So how do you kind of, orientate yourself? Do you think like, hey, this house or this room or this building is northward facing or southward? How do you kind of figure out like with the timing of that?
Yeah. So obviously the perspective of the building itself when you're doing exteriors is super important. You want sunlight on the building. It's going to look better when you're shooting for that architect. They designed all of the nooks and crannies and chose the certain brick or whatever it is material for a reason. And the sunlight is going to help highlight that. So north facing properties can create some additional challenges. That's probably something you don't want to shoot at 10 a.m. That's probably something that I would shoot at twilight, just because then you kind of have softer light. And so it's not as big of a deal that the sunlight's maybe not hitting it directly the way that, you could get with a southeast or west facing building. So on the exteriors, definitely always try and get the sun hitting it when I can. For interiors, every space is a little bit different. I like when sunlight is shining in and through, even if it's kind of like cutting across, it creates some nice depth, texture to the space. When you're shooting, I find away from the sun. So basically the sun would be at your back. Even though you're inside, the sun would be at your back. I feel like your exterior is just so blown out compared to the interior that it's a much harder shot from a dynamic range standpoint. Getting that good exterior view that folks want. So again, every situation is going to be different. You might have a nice cloudy day from the interior and you just have a soft box. Essentially, the sky is basically turning into a big soft box and you can kind of shoot things whenever. But definitely think about those things when you're shooting, whether it's a room in a house, a lobby of a building, when they have these huge glass windows. It's nice when some of that sunlight can be kind of coming through to create some energy, some life, and some pop.
Yeah. So like kind of this, like you said, the sun behind you, or maybe off to like behind side of you, whatever, or even to the side of you, but just try not to, if you can avoid it, to shoot into the sun. Just
The same direction as the sun is pointing. So I actually like when the sun is pointing at me, so that way then you get the sunlight in the room. When the sun's at your back, when you're on the inside, sometimes. Like I said,
gotcha. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for all of you out there, I was backwards.
Just like your hat.
Just like
your hat right now.
So face the sun. Put the wind at your face.
That's right. Which is the opposite of exteriors, because exteriors you want to stand in the shade. That's kind of
there you go. Yeah.
The old, tale essentially. If you're standing in the shade, then your subject is in the sun and you're winning.
There you go. Well, that's good. Because see, these are the things that like, I think it's awesome because I think people are going to pick up on this or enjoy this.
Yeah.
All right. So
ready to move on to number 2?
Sure. Because this in here is, I think, a big one that I think varies. So I'm excited to hear what you have on this, just to hear
Yeah.
what people
So the
say.
second one is really the first one now. It's the day of the shoot. You've done your scouting, you're ready to go, but you still probably didn't finalize one thing. You might kind of have basically where you want to place the camera, but how high do you want to place the camera? And that's always a big thing that I find in architectural photography is how high do you want it to be? And obviously there's going to be a number of factors that go into it. Exteriors, interiors, that kind of thing. So for exteriors, I usually start my camera at about 7 feet high. That's kind of my go-to starting point. So a little bit above the average person's height, essentially. The building's usually significantly couple stories, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories, whatever it is. So having the camera a little bit higher is nice. For interiors, I usually start around 5.5 feet. Again, these are just starting points.
Okay.
The reason is because that's kind of how people view the space. It's a good representation of the space for an average person's height, essentially.
Okay.
I know there's people who are about 6'5" and might be like, well, I'm 6'5", so you're, well, on average, the around 5.5 feet seems to look good for me. A lot of things that are going to come into play, especially when you're talking interiors and exteriors. So for interiors, for that camera height, is there a piece of furniture that you want to get the camera above? And
Mm-hmm.
so in that case, you might actually need to raise the camera up so that way you can see above either countertop, a piece of furniture, or
Yeah.
something like that. And that's where tilt shift lenses are so great, is because you can raise the camera up, but then just lower the lens. So that way you're still actually seeing above that piece of furniture that you wanted to, but now you're lowering the perspective. So that way you don't have quite so much ceiling, if that makes sense. If you don't have a tilt shift lens, it can be kind of confusing, and we can talk about tilt shift lenses in a little bit more detail at some other point, but that's basically the gist of it, is that you can adjust that camera height and still keep the same perspective that you want with the tilt shift lens. And
Yeah,
the
that's
same
awesome.
thing goes for exteriors. You can set up your camera height and then adjust the tilt shift up, or tilt it up, shift it up, and then you can get the whole building in, so that way you don't have to just keep on, you don't have to have a 50-foot tripod to keep your vertical lines vertical and
Mm-hmm.
get the entire building in the frame.
Okay. Well,
Does
that's
that
a
make
pretty
sense? Did
well.
I did
Yeah.
I did I
Well,
explain this in a way that our audience is going to understand?
I I think so. Put me down on the noob portion of this, and I would say I understand, because like I think that you hit on it really well, saying like taking it as, or thinking about it how people would perceive or experience the space.
Mm-hmm.
Like Corbusier would be a smaller, just like the French architect, it'd be like small, like little whatever. But then it's totally different. So when I've done it at times, like I'll be at like 4.5-ish feet, but that's because I'm only like 4 foot tall.
You're taller than that, Jeff. You're taller.
So yeah, no, I think that's really great. So the 5.5 to start, like starting point, and then moving
Mm-hmm.
from there.
And I know that, I did reference the tilt shift lenses, and those can be really expensive. So if you're just starting out, that might not be something that you can purchase. So totally understand that. And it's something that, as you're building up your portfolio and your equipment, you're going to have to work through in terms of, okay, how am I still able to get this shot and get the right perspective without having that piece of equipment?
Totally.
So if you think about it, as you're raising your camera up, you're now getting more ceiling, and maybe that's going to change the view that
Yeah.
you and your client want. So how can you possibly, correct for that? Well, maybe you could do 2 sets of images and blend them together later in Photoshop.
Right.
So there are ways around it. You could shoot wider and then crop. So just think about ways that if you don't even have the equipment that maybe would be ideal for a scenario, how can you still make this camera height work to still get the shot that you want?
Cool.
But if you do have the means, get a tilt shift lens. It's going to be huge for your architectural photography success and make your life so much easier.
Good point. Good point. All right. Numero 3.
Numero 3. That's a good mix of English and Spanish. This one is pretty quick. Shoot tethered. There's a lot of different ways to do that, and what that means is your camera, either wired or wirelessly, is connected to a device that has a larger screen and usually runs some other software. That's essentially what I mean, what I'm talking about here. So I use Cam Ranger.
Yeah.
It looks like this. Let's see, can we see that?
Yeah.
There's Cam Ranger. It is a excellent device. It connects wirelessly to an iPad, and basically this is the screen that you have on your camera.
Okay. Yeah.
Right there.
You're there.
So you can adjust just about everything that you could possibly want. You got your shutter speed, ISO, f-stop. Do you want to delay? All those things. And you have live view, which is really, really nice. And so then that's basically allowing you to see what you're seeing. So if you're walking around the room, you're moving furniture, you can see it without having to go back to the camera and say, well, what does this really look like? Well, you can see it in live view, like on your iPad when you're, 30, 40, 50 feet away. Your client can see it now on a bigger screen. Everybody's happy. You can zoom in, make sure everything's tack sharp. So there's a lot of benefits to shooting tethered. There's other software that you can connect to a computer, which works really well too. And some photographers prefer that over the iPad. That's really just a personal preference thing. But again, being able to step away from your camera and look at what you've captured on a bigger screen is absolutely huge for getting those really tack sharp images and make sure all the details are exactly how you want them.
Cool. So that there right now, like, I think this would be a good point to like bring up or mention. It's like, okay, when we're out there and we're thinking, like, right now, if I were thinking, hey, you know what, I want to buy an iPad just to read on.
Yeah.
But I'm also a photographer. Saving people the money of then them going and buying the wrong item that then they could have bought just this. So like, when you're buying the Cam Ranger, what does that work with? Like, do you need to get like a newer iPad, like iPad 2 up, or like what would?
I mean, basically, I think the software works on just about anything. I've had my newer iPad die on me, and I've used, I think it might be the iPad Air or the iPad Air 2, which has got to be at least 4 or 5 years old. So still works, software runs, and it's a good piece of software from an application standpoint. You can run it off of your computer as well.
Okay.
So if you did want to just wirelessly connect it to your computer, you could do that. Capture One is another popular software, and so that's connected right to your computer. Really just depends on how you want to use the tethering. Do you want it to just be something where, okay, I have a bigger screen that I can make sure everything's sharp and I can click make small adjustments to ISO or shutter speed and get your pictures? Or are you going to be roaming around the room, popping flashes, moving furniture, that kind of thing? In that case, I think the Cam Ranger might be a better option, because you can just walk around with your iPad.
Your wireless.
And clients love being able to look over your shoulder and see what you've done. And so having either, again, on the computer with a Capture One or wirelessly to the iPad with the Cam Ranger, it's a great way to, get the client's buy-in right away that, yep, this is furniture's in the right place. Perspective's good. I know it doesn't look the way it's going to look in the end because I'm going to do all sorts of edits to it, but here's basically what I'm going to deliver.
That's awesome. Cool. Okay. Well, and then like you have here, this does, like you just said, being able to go through and stylize and all that is your number 4. Yeah.
It is. So style your photo. What does that mean? Well, interior architecture images, whether you're shooting it for an architect or an interior designer or whoever, they might have it staged, but you're basically taking a 3-dimensional space flattening it into a two-dimensional image. And
Yes.
because of that, you're going to have to make some changes to the space, whether that's moving furniture in or out of the space, decluttering spaces. It's amazing how you don't realize the amount of little things that are placed in a room that if you were to take a picture, you wouldn't be able to tell, is that a dresser? Is that a coffee table? Like what's
Right.
going on with it?
Right.
And so taking the time to really style the photo, move everything in the right place is huge. It's so much easier to do that stuff on site than it is to get back into Photoshop, send your client the images, and they're like, can you get rid of this? Or can you shift this over here? That's a pain in the butt to do in Photoshop. It's going to take so much time. I'd rather spend 45 minutes to an hour moving everything around, showing the client on my iPad with the Cam Ranger, because everything's wirelessly tethered, what I'm delivering on
Right.
site, and then making all of those moves, making all those changes. And, it just makes things so much simpler
So much
in
simpler.
post-production.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's huge. Just like we've talked about that in the past, how to stylize and how to be able to see eventually, but be able to see how this 3D space gets interpreted in like a 2D, and how we have
Yeah.
to how like great architectural photographers think about that.
And it's hard, and it's going to take some practice. I mean, I feel like I'm still always learning and hopefully getting better at styling the photo on site and making those
Right.
improvements. But it can be a challenge, or maybe you're dealing with the architect or the interior designer, and they're like, well, I put this here for a reason. And
Right.
so it can take some delicate conversations on site to get them to agree to move something. And if they won't, one of my things that I always do is I'm like, okay, let's take a shot with it there, and then let's take a shot with it not there.
Right.
And then that way you have both. I mean, it's just pixels. We all have plenty of memory cards.
Right.
So that way you kind of keep them happy, but you know that you're going to end up delivering the image probably the way that you wanted it, because they're going to see what you saw when you
Right.
actually deliver the two-dimensional interpretation of their space.
Right. And then when they complain, the architect, you're like, well, why did you make that wall look that bad, you dummy?
Yeah. Try not to say that to our clients, but I hear what you're
Yeah.
saying. So,
All right. Cool. Well, that is a huge, I mean, that's a big one because that's tough and that does take a lot of time. And
yep.
then that I think does
And
take.
before we move on, just one last
Sorry.
thing on the stylizing of photos is think about, and this is where again tethering comes in handy because you can see the picture so much bigger. Look at all of the little details. Make sure there's no trash cans or any
Oh,
little things like that are
yes.
still in the photo, because you're going to spend time in Photoshop removing them, and that is just one of the easiest things to miss, because you're so
Yep.
used to seeing trash cans and things like that in a space that your brain doesn't think I need to move this.
Right. Well, what about the drain plugs for the sink? Do you leave those or do you move them?
So if you can actually see into the sink.
No, no, no. Like if you're taking a photograph of a kitchen
Yeah.
and then, it's always one of these things that's like, for whatever reason, it's like property management, or sometimes people think like putting the nice drain plug up on the
No,
top
no,
of the
you
sink.
got to get rid of that kind of stuff. I mean, come on.
Hey, just asking,
Yeah.
just asking for the people watching.
Yeah, exactly. Clean up the space. Less clutter is better. All right, so the next one is filters. And so for that one, I'm actually going to share my screen for it because I do have a couple of examples just to show the power and the impact and the change that a filter can make in your photo. So are we good to go
Yeah.
ahead and do a screen share?
Yep. Screen share
Cool.
it.
All right, let's do it. Screen share time. Most people think about using filters in landscape photography, but filters are just as valuable for architecture photographers. And so what you see on the screen here is a sorority house at Georgia Tech University that I was photographing for an architect. And I had my filter on. This was a circular polarizer filter. And I want to use this as an example to just show the power of these filters and how they can completely change the scene and save you time in Photoshop. So this is going to be an exterior example. I do have an interior example that I'm going to show you here as well. But in general, polarizing filters are great because they eliminate glare and add color contrast and pop. So I'm going to just play this video, and as you'll see it, the thing that I want you to look at is the sky. And so what you'll see as I'm spinning the filter, how the sky goes from a dark blue to almost a white.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same time of day. I'm not making any other adjustments to the image. Again, this is a video. So, but just look at how much more contrast and pop your image has when you engage that polarizer filter and you have that nice blue sky that now you don't have to blend in a sky. You don't have to do any fancy Photoshop work.
Right.
The polarizer filter did it for you on site.
Right. Well, oh, sorry. Go. I
No,
was
go. You go ahead.
all I was going to say too is that no amount of Photoshop can eliminate glare, if
No.
I'm not mistaken. So you could, a lot of, and I deal with this a lot of time with people or clients and just in the field with landscape work. It's like, well, we can just darken the sky. It's like, well, yeah, you can, but you can't, like right here, like the glare and all that, like on the windows and all around, like that, just, you can't do that without a polarizer.
Yeah. And just the detail really that it brings out.
Yep.
You can't replicate that in Photoshop or anywhere else. And so, this shot was probably taken kind of close to midday, which isn't usually the ideal time to take an exterior photo, but I think the light overall in the building is pretty good. This is when we were able to take the shot. It made sense. And by using that polarizer filter, we're getting a pretty solid image that doesn't look like it's overpowered by the sunny day.
Right. Looks great. Awesome. Let's see that inside if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's see here. Okay, so here's our inside side by side. And polarizing filters for interiors are great for removing glare on surfaces. We're talking things like coffee tables, floors, a wood wall,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. And so you can kind of see, again, these are two photos with the exact same settings. The only difference is the engagement of the circular polarizer.
Yeah.
The image on the left, you'll notice perfectly clear view through the glass into the conference room.
Yep.
If you didn't have a polarizing filter, what you'd see on that conference room is what's on the right. And so you can see reflection of the exit sign. You got the logo of the building, all that kind of stuff. It's not a clear, nice view into the space. And really the only other way to remove that glare would be to turn off all the lights and hope that that worked, or use black cloth to block the light.
Right. Off, like outside of the frame, correct? Like off, like to the right, you would go somewhere over there.
Yeah, and you can actually see a little bit of black cloth up in the upper right-hand corner that I did use to block a little bit of glare there. But the polarizing filter is doing 99% of the work.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is, when you look at the image on the right too, look at how much better the floor looks than the image on the left. So by, again, turning that polarizer, you're engaging it in a different spot.
Yeah.
And so you're removing glare. So then you can just blend these two together and you have a nice clear view into the conference room. And on blending in the image on the right, you have that nice floor that you're working with.
Yeah. Awesome.
So again, I use them both interiors and exteriors. It's probably my go-to filter. I don't have it on all the time, certainly, but I do use them a lot. If you're going to buy one filter for architectural photography, it is going to be that circular polarizer. And again, you can kind of see here what it does and the difference that it can make in really creating, again, a nice clean image that is going to, again, allow you to deliver something that is going to wow your client.
I love this shop though too. How you've got the conference room on the left and how just the way you composed it to where it leads your eye right through that circle on the glass door, you know, the etched glass into the other, like, looks like, well, office room.
Yeah, it's like a bigger conference space.
Yeah, it looks like a big one. But that's just, it's a cool shot because you've got like two conference rooms right there back to back. That looks great. Nice, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So hopefully this was helpful for folks in terms of understanding, again, how to use filters, specifically the circular polarizer, both for their interiors and exteriors.
And why they're important.
Why they're
And like, and then I love this here because like you said, how it is affecting the glass and the photo on the left, but it's kind of negatively, as you said, affecting the floor space on the photo on the left. So you would have taken the two, blended them together. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
Right. Because it's like the left photo, get rid of the glare on the glass. Right photo, keep that really shiny, good marble look on the floor.
Yep. You're done.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. All right. Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, ready.
All right.
All right.
All right. So next one, which is point number 6, is a big one for me. And I kind of started out my journey in the architectural photography world in real estate, and their big wide angle lenses are king or queen, because you want to get the entire room in one frame. Whereas in architectural photography, you don't necessarily need to do that. It's really about telling the story, and the wider lens is maybe going to distort the image. Something that's closer is going to seem really big, and something that's far away is going to seem really small.
Yeah.
So I usually like to shoot most of my architectural work at about either 24 millimeters, anywhere between 24 and 45 millimeters. So I wouldn't say call that super wide or super zooming in. It's kind of an in-between, some in-between focal lengths, really. And the tilt shift, that's just because the tilt shift comes in the 24 and the 45. Those are kind of the two options. So I would just encourage folks, try to put on a longer lens. Start with your 24 or 45, or if you don't have the tilt shift lenses, start your zoom lens at, 50, 40, 35, something like that, and see, am I telling the story in this focal length, or do I actually really need to go wider?
Right.
There's spaces like hotel rooms where you do need to probably go wider, or bathrooms, but a lot of spaces you can tell a story in 24, 35, 45, etc. focal length. And you're compressing the scene. You're just really creating just a really nice image.
But that's huge, because like that there is something I think that's like on all of these points here. All of these are fantastic points you're bringing up, these tips, these points. But that one, I think, is a huge one, just because everybody, you, me, like everybody, like, we want to capture the whole space. It's like, well, the human eye sees, more of like this in a way. So yeah, I think that's really, really good advice to tell people to not try to go so wide.
Yeah.
Like,
if you need to,
if you do, you do, right?
yeah.
Yeah, because there have been times I've asked you, I've said like, hey, Adam, like, have you ever shoot at like 14? And you're like, not really, man.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's like, no, generally 24. And I'm like, mind blown.
Yeah. So basically zoom in, see if you can get your scene captured that way. If you need to go wider, great.
Cool.
So those are kind of the big 6. There's a couple other ones that did want to touch on real quick. Keep your vertical lines and your horizontal lines as vertical and horizontal as possible. This is, your architect designed the space with hopefully vertical lines, horizontal lines, and your builder hopefully built it that way too. And so, make sure when you're setting up your image that you got it laid out that way, and you need to make some tweaks in Photoshop. You can do that. Another one is color accuracy, artistic representation of the space. We always do want to kind of put a little bit of artistic spin on the photos, but definitely try and keep it as realistic as possible. This is especially true if you're shooting hospitality. People expect to see certain things in the hotel room, so what you're capturing needs to represent the space. If you're shooting, other commercial work, you might have a little bit more artistic leeway and freedom than maybe you would with a hospitality shoot.
Yeah.
I think that was a lot. I hope that was helpful for everybody. Do you think I missed anything you want to add in?
No, because the color accuracy, I'm glad you touched on that, just because, when you look at architectural photographers and their work, you see a breadth of style, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important for everyone to understand that just, there's not any like one that looks proper or whatnot, but it's like, because it still is you as the photographer, but it's also kind of, understanding like kind of what these clients look for, but also trying to be true to yourself, but creating what is like accurate.
Yeah.
But also not like thinking that you have to just go make yourself look like somebody else. And that's another
exactly. Create your own style.
Yep.
Find some people that inspire you, but
Yeah.
always make it your own.
Always make it your own. That's the title of this week's episode.
That's right. Make it your own. So, all right. So our In Focus's top architectural photography tips. Number 1, scout the shoot. Number 2, get the camera height right. Number 3, shoot tethered. Number 4, style the photo. Number 5, use filters. And number 6, zoom in.
And 6.5?
6.5 was vertical lines, color accuracy, artistic representation, some of those things. So
right. Perfect. All right, man.
Cool.
This one was a fun one.
It was. They've all been fun.
They've all been fun. And I love how you're in the ATL, where one of my favorite podcasts is the Stuff You Should Know.
Yeah, that's a good podcast.
Because those two guys, if I could ever be like two guys on a podcast, I would like to be those two guys.
Besides us, of course.
Besides us, I'm just saying. Because those two guys are just like
they know stuff.
They know stuff, and then they make you laugh. So
they do. They're
it makes me think of those guys when I'm talking to you. I'm thinking, I wonder what are their names, like Jeff and Steve, or Jeff and Josh. I forget, but they're funny. They're good dudes.
So check them out. Non-photography related. Check them out. All right. So everyone, thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate it. To close out this episode, you can find this video podcast on YouTube at In Focus Videocast, which is where you're watching us now. Please subscribe, tell your friends, share it. We would greatly appreciate that. And remember that new episodes are released every Friday.
Yeah.
We are also on iTunes and Spotify at In Focus Videocast, so you can take us on the go. You won't be able to see some of the screen sharing and some of that other stuff, but hopefully you'll still get some good knowledge and enjoy our discussions when you're taking us on the go there. Please email us. We want to hear your questions, comments, feedback. Again, if you have questions, you want us to talk about something, let us know. That's what we're here for. So please do that. That email address is infocusvideocast@gmail.com. I think that's it, Joe.
Gmail. Yeah.
Email.
Okay, man. Well, until next week.
Yeah. Take care.
Real.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, that's the big one. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
All right. See ya. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.